questions. I thought, let's try to have a session devoted just to this, and maybe 10 people will show up, and that would be great. And all of you've shown up, and some of you have come from other campuses. So thank you very much. We're going to keep it really informal today. I've asked each of the professors to prepare whatever they wanted to share, and then I thought we'd just have a really informal discussion. And we'll go until about 10. Please get up and get coffee and food as needed. And with that, I'll turn it over to Marcy. If you want to kick it off, and you guys can just go up and down the nose as you pick. Is that cool? Because you're holding the mic, so.
I thought I'd pass it down and we can start it.
Okay,
So I'm Jean Cook. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Biochemistry and Biophysics, which is part of the School of Medicine here. I run a lab that studies DNA replication and cell cycle control. And since this is a work-life balance thing, I'll tell you I'm married to an assistant public defender who's actually in a trial right now, so there's the balancing part. And we have 2 kids, 2 boys, they're 11 and 14.
I'm Heidi Gill from Duke. I'm a professor of physics in chemistry, and my research is experimental nuclear physics. And what I do is to use atomic experimental technique like optical pumping using laser to polarize to align the spin of particles, and with atomic energy scattering experiment with electron beam, proton beam. And I have 3 kids. One is my biological kid. He is a college freshman. And I have 2 stepchildren, and they are much younger, 10 and 12. And I have a husband who actually is a professor of physics and is in agriculture.
Guys, if you can just speak up a little bit, these vents are really loud, and some of those people back here can't hear. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Kathy Franz. I'm an associate professor in chemistry at Duke University in bioinorganic chemistry. I'm married to an attorney who works in Raleigh. We live in Durham. Usually I don't, this is not part of my normal intro, right? We do have 2 kids, a 3.5-year-old boy and a 4-month-old daughter. So if you're counting, that's 1 child pre-tenure, 1 child post-tenure.
I'm Marcy Waters. I'm a chemistry professor at UNC doing bioorganic and chemical biology research. I am a full professor. I've been here about 12 years. I've got a 3.5-year-old daughter. I've got a husband who teaches middle school social studies. Great.
Good morning. I'm Nita Eskew. I'm an associate professor of chemistry from Salem College, which is in Winston-Salem, a little west of here. And I'm married. My husband is self-employed, which allows some flexibility. I have 2 children. My daughter is actually a first-year student here at Chapel Hill this year, and my son is a high school sophomore.
I'm Dorothy Early. I'm a professor of chemistry. I've been here 16 years. I can't believe it. I'm not married, however. I've been with my other half since about 16 years. He is a carpenter, with houses for us. And I don't have any kids, but I have a very crazy dog. And my research focuses on kind of biochemistry and biophysics, and like single molecule studies, trying to understand how the fidelity of replication and transcription.
So you guys have questions for us?
So we can do 2 ways. We can start just with the questions if you guys want to just jump right into that, or if each of you want to sort of give a short little thing on how you negotiated graduate school with other responsibilities. So do you guys just want to dive into questions? It's early, I know, but I'm sure we can come to a decision.
I think you guys should ask us questions.
Moderated for a bit and then questions.
Say it again?
Like maybe if you want to moderate for a bit and then maybe some questions will come from that.
Okay, well, yeah, let's just start with the questions and we'll shoot it around.
Whoever wants to go first. How did you know you wanted to be a research professor? I mean, it's a big commitment.
Can you repeat the question?
The question was, how did we know we wanted to be a research professor? So not all of us are research professors. Nita's not. She's a small college professor. I knew very quickly that I did. So I didn't actually start out as a chemistry major, I started out as an engineering major, and when I got to the upper division classes, I thought, oh God, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And I found my way to an organic chemistry class and thought it was the coolest thing ever. And pretty quickly decided I wanted to go to graduate school, and pretty quickly decided I wanted to be a professor because I really was interested in fundamental questions in chemistry, and so I thought that my interests would be best suited in academics. And I knew I wanted to be sort of a research at a research university because research is what was really exciting about it to me. I like teaching, but I don't think I'd be satisfied just teaching or having a primary focus be on teaching. And I love I think all of us do, the creative aspects of being a research professor and the complete independence.
I'll get to that question, but maybe the other question, I have a question for you. And it's sort of, why are you here? It looks to me like you're all here. I mean, there's a lot of you. And so there must be something that you want to get out of it. So maybe you're all asking that same question. Is that a fair assumption? How many people are asking the same question that she asked? Like, maybe you think you might want to do a research position, but you're really not sure because you want to find out how people do this. So, I remember being in that same situation as a graduate student, not really sure. I still don't know. So there was even an ACS blog that came through my email yesterday about women in science, or they shunned in science. You didn't see this? Mm-hmm. And it linked to a PNAS paper about this. So I thought, oh, this is a good talking point for tomorrow. I should print this out. And then I proceeded to read it on the printer and rushing home to pick up the daycare. And this is the balance. So I never did read the article, and I probably won't. And part of it is sort of, I don't want to read the article. I live it, so the more you focus on it, if you read all those things, you probably wouldn't go into this job. Is that a fair enough assumption? I mean, it would scare you away because the numbers aren't there or whatever. So my advice to you is don't read that stuff and follow what it is that you want to do. So to answer your question, I have to say I didn't really know. I mean, I sort of went through the steps, do undergraduate research, go to graduate school. There were mentors along the way who encouraged me. I do clearly remember one time in graduate school, a visiting professor who was on the visiting committee at MIT met with a bunch of young women chemists. And she was so encouraging. She was like, you guys are just so smart. You don't even know how smart you are. You have so much to look forward to. And it really resonated with me, I have to say. And I bring this up because she actually just recently passed away over the weekend. She's in her 60s and was a pioneering woman in chemistry at Stony Brook. But I remember her kind of encouragement, saying, if this is what you really want to do, don't worry about these other things, these statistics and these numbers, and do what you want to do. So if you have this inkling that you think you really like research, if there's something about that, follow those things and find the support around you, like the mentorship, to find people who continue to tell you how smart you are instead of people who tell you otherwise.
So I'll reiterate that what got me into this was just a real passion for the research. And there was a point, I remember in graduate school, where I was thinking, oh, well, maybe it'd be easier if I went into not the whole tenure track faculty position part of it, because you see your professors, and they look really stressed, especially when they're grant writing. And you think, oh, there's got to be an easier way. What I can tell you is that if you're going into a career, a professional career, where you have any kind of intellectual independence and are not punching a clock, it's going to be stressful. My husband's job is stressful. He's a trial attorney. And when he's in the middle of a trial, he's stressed out every bit as much as I am about my grants, and then you have the times in between. But one of the real benefits that I don't think I realized at the time when I said, oh, I really want to be my own boss, and I want to do the research that interests me, is just how much flexibility you have. So this work-life balance thing is great because I set my own hours. If I need to be at the school for some party, I can be at the school because I'm in charge of my day. I'm not punching a clock or having to show up at a specific time, except when I'm teaching. So I think that's one of the real benefits. And what I see in the graduate students here is the whole, oh, I don't want that kind of stress, I don't want that kind of responsibility. I'm like, but yeah, it comes with these super perks.
For me, I always always liked to do research, so I wanted to be a physicist, a computational physicist. In fact, I was a staff scientist at National Lab before I went to MIT as an assistant professor. And the part is that I really want to be working with students. That's a very important part of my professional life, and that's why I want to be a university professor in a research university, so that I can do both.
I don't want to give my whole career because I'm actually speaking again at 10, so I won't give you the whole spiel now, but I actually started in industry, and again, I think seeing the professors stressed and so forth sort of deterred me. And think about that at times and wish maybe it would not have, because I started in industry but then actually transitioned to teaching and academics. I do have a small research project going now, but the main focus at the small college is teaching. And so there's much less support for the research, which has some limitations there with that. And I do definitely agree with that time flexibility in industry. There, towards the end, I was in supervision of production. So you were there from the 7 a.m. shift when it began, be there during shift change. And then you could usually leave at a normal hour as long as there was no actual crisis, a spill or something like that. But then you had that pager that stayed with you 24/7. And so it never would fail, time to sit down for dinner, you're home for a few hours out of the day, sit down for dinner and the pager goes off. You're trying to spend a few minutes with the kids and they're in the bathtub trying to get them ready for bed and the pager goes off. So that's one thing I think that even though the hours are different, that became somewhat of an irritant for me, trying to balance the family as well.
And so I was interested in research from very early on, and I also didn't tell you that I'm the youngest of 9 kids, so I really don't like to be told what to do. And so being a professor was, really good because I don't get told what to do very often. But I really love the research, and I went to, for me, going to a small school, I love to teach, and that's why I wanted to be in arts and science as opposed to a medical school, right? And I really like working with students, and I like seeing them go from not scientists to actually being scientists. And it's kind of a quantized thing where all your book knowledge, and some of you probably have experienced it, all your book knowledge and your lab knowledge come together, and it's like, bingo, I get it, and I'm somebody. And I also, I grew up at pretty big schools and in big research labs. And for me, I couldn't see myself, being somewhere in a small, because that's not what I know, it's not what I love, and so I like the big lab, I like working with lots of students, and I like doing high-powered research. And, is it really harder than doing something else? I'm not so sure, I don't think that I bet I don't work any harder than you do. And I have an incredible amount of freedom. I get to be creative, I get to do what I want, as long as I can get my grants, I get to change what I do, right? I have lots of choices. I get to, how many people in the world actually get paid to think? And I get paid to think. And that's basically what I get paid to do. That's what we get paid to do. We get paid to think. And most people get paid not to think, right? And so, it's a fabulous job. Yeah, it's stressful at times, and and being a woman in it, because I'm in the physical end, and there's issues with that. But you ask yourself, you say, okay, I could be this person. They've gotten all these things on a silver platter, etc. But are they really any happier than I am? And the answer is no, right? And so, I love what I do. That's what drives me. Is I like working with the people, and it's. I don't think it's more work. I have freedom, I can take a week off if I want. I just have to, make up for it somewhere else, right? But I have an incredible amount of freedom with what I want to do. So it's a great job.
Any questions?
Can we pass the mic around for the questions?
I can talk.
Yeah, I think we should be able to reach but just for recording reasons.
I told Kurt to make it work Tim Gunn style. I was like, you have to make the microphone work. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess, right, I mean, we're all at varying careers and varying stages in our graduate career probably, but I think I'm really interested in the next steps and how you guys navigated, like, especially with going the postdocs to getting a faculty position, and especially, like, if you're, I don't know, if your husband is also kind of on the same boat, any advice you could give on, especially navigating two kind of high-powered careers, where, yes, you have some flexibility when you're both professors or even when you get to the professor stage. And postdocs have some too, but in the same end, you have a lot to get done. And how, yeah, any advice there would be great.
Awesome, thank you.
That sounds like somebody that's got.
Short version of that. Essentially what you're referencing is the two-body problem, right? So because you spend all your time with scientists, there's a reasonable chance you'll end up with a scientist, and you see a lot of that. So my husband is not a scientist, but when we were at these stages of where am I going to do my postdoc, where are we going to end up applying for faculty positions, a lot of it's a little like a genetic screening, if you're familiar with any of that. You apply to a lot of places, and you have to be ready to compromise and try to make both of you at least satisfied, if not picking your absolute favorite one. So negotiating that transition from postdoc to faculty position, it's obviously, you know, it's highly competitive. There are tons of applications for every position. If you're both applying, then you both have to apply to a whole lot of positions. And as soon as you show up, so on my first faculty interviews, they're not allowed to ask you if you're married or if you have kids, but there were these chairs, and it was usually the guys, and they looked so uncomfortable, like, oh, I see you have a ring, and like, no, you're not a scientist, you don't have, and they just wanted to know, do we need to help you find a job? So the people who are hiring are very much aware that this is a common problem, and they will do what they can, even if it's a nearby university. So biochemistry just hired a woman whose husband was hired at NC State, and there was an arrangement between UNC and NC State to get them both here and make it work. There are even a few schools who specialize in the two-body problem. They always have two positions open just in case. So as long as you're working on exactly the same thing, I think it's doable, but not, it's just a little more challenging.
So I think my life is a bit more complicated than that because I was divorced and now I'm remarried. Talking about postdoc, I knew I did not want to be a postdoc for a long time, so I was very determined. I had my son when I was a graduate student, and so I really didn't want to be a postdoc for a long time. So I was very passionate about my work, and I was also have a sense of urgency. I want to not be a postdoc. So I was pretty lucky. Things went very well with my research, and also I had very good mentors, and both my PhD mentor as well as my postdoc mentors, they both were great. So I was able to find actually a couple offers of different national lab job as well as university faculty job. And at the time I decided to take the national lab job first, just because I think I was not particularly happy with the possibility. And but my former husband at the time was still in graduate school, so I was offered by my PhD advisor to stay as a postdoc in his group to wait for my former husband to graduate. And I made it. It was difficult for me to decide because my son was very young at the time. But I made the decision that I decided to leave Caltech to move on with my career, and I'm glad I didn't make the decision to wait because my former husband finally graduated in 2010. And I graduated in 1994. So if I had to wait, I'm not joking, so that would be another 15 years to so anyway, so then I'm very happily married. My husband is a fine mathematician, but he also does physics.
So compromise, but not sacrifice.
I'll make a contrast that about the postdoc part. So if you really know what you want to do and you can do a short postdoc, that's great, but you don't have, another way of looking at a postdoc is a real opportunity and not something just to rush through to get on with your real job. So, I mean, it really is a unique time where you don't have hoops to go through for graduate school. You can go into a new area and you can spend some time thinking about it. So, and I want to reiterate what Dorothy said earlier about you get paid to think. We do get paid to think. But I'll tell you, as the mother of a 4-month-old and a 3.5-year-old and running a group and back to teaching and whatever, is my time to think right now is compressed into these little modules that is so frustrating because what I really need are these extended periods to think. And right now in my life, I don't really have that. You know, looking for, there's windows when you can get back to it. But your postdoc is a time when you're not on, and I didn't realize this, and I remember people telling me this, like, you know, these old professors who reminisce about the preamble days of being a postdoc or a graduate student, and then all they had to do was think, and yeah, whatever, you know. But now I kind of see what they were talking about. That you don't have all of these other things, and you can really delve in, you can diversify yourself, learn a new area, so that as you move on, if you want to go into a faculty position, you really have your bases covered. You know, everyone's talking about multidisciplinarity and whatever, that you have real research experience in something that's different that you can really leverage into a faculty position. It is really can be a precious time. Are you making a lot of money? No. But you know, and people say this about life in graduate school too, oh, you're not making that much money. You're getting paid. If you had to pay the tuition that you get paid, you would be getting a lot more money. You would just be paying your tuition. So, you know, graduate school is just a great deal when you come out that way. You're not in debt, so, you know, you're not, I don't know, you're not an investment banker, but right now, who wants to be an investment banker? So that postdoc, those postdoc years, whether or not that's a time you focus on, do you start a family or wait and do that later, you know, whatever it is a unique time when you don't have these other trappings of a real job. And yes, it is stressful, but it is that time when you do get to think and do the research. And then you get in the faculty position, you do that for a little bit, and then maybe all of a sudden, you know, you're not in the bench anymore. Whether you like that or not, you do a different transition. Some people still are. You probably still do experiments.
Oh, yeah, experiments. I hated experiments. I'm an analyst. I like to look at the data. You know, I'm the perfect professor. You do the experiment. I'll look at the data. You know.
So that doesn't necessarily give an answer to this two-body problem, but let me also reiterate from a faculty position where we're hiring people is that people do want really well-qualified women candidates, and they will try to go and try to make two-body situations work. If people are trying to look to see if you're married, or they're not doing this as a negative thing, they're really trying to figure out so that they're not putting an investment in to have it fall apart at the end because they couldn't figure out a two-body situation. So it is not a liability. You know, you don't think if you're on a job interview and they're trying to probe about your personal life, it's really not a liability kind of issue. They're really trying to figure out how to make it work in most cases.
Just like to add on this time. So when I was being recruited by Duke, I was single mother, so I was thinking that I didn't have to worry about two-body problems. So, however, my husband was a professor in Maryland, so Duke actually did a terrific job. They actually managed to, during this very difficult market downturn, actually offer my husband a position at Duke. So very grateful. And also one more correction from my husband, not being too old on
Other questions?
I can say just one other thing about the two-body problem, and that is, in my experience, I mean, there is the two-body problem in terms of finding a job or finding a postdoc and so forth. There's also how the couple works together, and I mean, you know, you have to really start thinking as a couple and not as two individuals, and both people really need to make the best decision for the couple and the family, and if that doesn't happen, at least from my personal experience, it doesn't work out. You know, I mean, anyway, I won't go into more detail, but teamwork is really important.
I'll say one thing about the postdoc, and because a lot of, and one of the things I see with a lot of students is they're like, oh, they want to do something different, but they think, well, why would they want to hire me? Because, you know, I don't know anything about that. Well, you know, when I went to my postdoc, I wrote my postdoc grant. I realized while I was writing the grant that I had a very fundamental misunderstanding about what I was writing about, because I knew so little about it. I embarrassed myself. But, you know, the bottom line is postdocs are great, and it's a great time to do something different. And I don't care what the background is, pretty much, of somebody. I care, can they think, are they smart? You know, if you've learned it once, you can learn anything, you know, if you're interested in it. And often, you know, bringing somebody, I don't really want somebody that's got the same expertise that I have as a postdoc, because that doesn't expand my lab. I just hired I've got actually 3 postdocs. 2 that are like very much cell biology. I've learned just an incredible amount of genetics and stuff. And one who's a material scientist. And they actually bring, you know, and he's developing new techniques in my lab. Things that I wouldn't be able to do, and it's his expertise. He didn't hardly knew what DNA was. But, you know, and so don't be afraid to do something different, you know. You think something's exciting, don't think, oh, well, they're not going to be interested in me, because, you know, if you've done well and you're smart and you can think, they're interested in you. Okay?
I'll just add one note with the postdoc too. At the end, or as I was interviewing, I had an offer from Bayer Corporation. I had a postdoc offer, and I was weighing those, and I ended up choosing to go to Bayer. But in some ways, I regret that I didn't do the postdoc again. I just sort of felt like time was slipping by, and I had to get out and move on here. But don't feel like that. There is time, and I would encourage you to do one.
Best time of your life, scientifically.
Right, you might have to stand up. Sorry.
Yeah, to make it, yeah. If you mind just.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Thank you.
So I guess this is somewhat directed at you, Dr. Franz, but can you guys comment on having kids pre-tenure versus post-tenure and problems, and did that raise any issues with your career?
So this is when it's really kind of scary. This is getting recorded. So these are, all kinds of stories you don't necessarily share with the whole world, but okay. When it came down to it, you think, oh, do you wait until, it's sort of like it was the right time in our life, and if you wait for somebody else's timeline, you can't be guaranteed of anything. So you just have to not worry, too much about that. It was also a time that my lab was doing very well, and I put a lot of trust in my students. So none of my students are here, although lots of their friends are. So it did take some time away, but I really did trust my students to keep things, we're a team, and we kept things kind of moving. But there were some things that I did pre-tenure okay, so the one example was, my son was 3 months old, and I had to go to England for a conference that was for me, career-wise, I thought a very important conference. So we got a fever the night before I left to go to England, and it was going to Durham, England, which takes 24 hours to get from Durham, North Carolina, for like a 3-day conference. Okay, so this is being recorded, so I was also breastfeeding at the time, so this might be more information than those of you need to know, but being on a transatlantic flight during this time of your life is not a great idea. So made it through, and it did turn out to be a very critical conference. I made some great connections. It was worth it, but it was, on a personal level, it was a huge sacrifice, and it was a bit challenging. I don't regret it, but I said I'm not doing this again post-tenure. I really don't have to do this. So, that's sort of 2 examples of some of the pressure. And yet, I'm glad that I did it. I wouldn't have done it. There's some other things, even post-tenure, I took on some responsibilities that I probably could have said no, but it's your career. You still need to remain visible. So, you balance that. So those are just some personal anecdotes.
So I had my first child at the end of graduate school and my second partway into my postdoc, so that was pre-faculty position. And I remember talking to some junior faculty women at Berkeley where I was a graduate student when I was thinking about whether we were going to start a family now or wait until I had the faculty job. I sort of felt like maybe there were two good times, or maybe there's bad and worse. But the good time to be pregnant and nursing and all that stuff. So, but it worked out fine. What I did do is I waited until I knew I was going to graduate. Like I had collected all the data, I had permission from my committee, I was going to graduate, wrote my dissertation on my maternity leave. That worked out really well. Waited until I had my project really going and I knew I had traction in my project as a postdoc before I had my second child. We were very lucky we could decide when we had kids, so we didn't have to really problem. The conference thing was a challenge. So both of my kids were weaned as a result of conferences. They were not quite as young as that, they were like 8 months or something like that. So that, you know, going back to work with an infant, there's no way your husband can help enough. It's just, biology is what it is. But this work-family balance thing is not just a mom thing. There are two parents, usually, and your significant other's husband, it was one guy here, I'm looking at one young-looking fellow here. It's not up to mom to make this work. It's up to both of you to make it work. So make sure that this isn't just something that's called made up.
Okay, so do you ever feel like, maybe at some point you just had to make this decision, but do you ever feel like your professional career is hurt because of a successful family, or your family is hurt because of a successful career? Or was this maybe based on your male counterparts, like your husband or other male people in your department, like they're more successful because they're not having to worry about kids and family, or vice versa?
Actually, a number of the male faculty in my department have kids and working wives, and they go home to pick up their kids from daycare and stuff like that. And I don't think they get enough credit for that. I think that they're seen as being great dads, and there's the worry that, well, maybe the moms who have to leave to go to a parent-teacher conference, oh, they're having to make sacrifices. But actually, I think that things are being more balanced, and dads are being expected to, and they are valuing the time that they're spending with their kids at home.
If you have other friends who are in other professional areas, especially medicine and law have to be two of the worst. They have no flexibility. So my husband's an attorney. Oh, yeah, he can work whatever he wants as long as he has 800 million, whatever, hours at the end of the year. You know, where do you find those? You know, so his job is not very flexible. You know, a faculty position is incredibly flexible. Yes, it has stresses that are associated with it, but it's one of the more flexible professional jobs that I know about. And so this issue is not unique. You know, the front page of the News and Observer had some story about some study that working moms' kids are at higher risk of some, it's like, oh my goodness, this is not unique to women in chemistry or science. It's not always easy, so are there times that you think, sacrificing? Right now, I feel like I'm juggling a lot. I was just saying, I feel like a funnel. More things come in the top than come out the bottom. And what comes out the bottom isn't always those deep thoughts kind of thing. I know I need to write some grants. I know I need to do it. Have I gotten around to situating myself down where I can really think about what our next big grant is going to be? No, I haven't done it yet. I'm a little nervous about how, I'm going to get a gap in my fund. Yeah, I am. Again, I rely, my team is really good. My students are good. I put a lot of faith in developing them to make sure that things keep going. But that is a challenge, and some of that is, that time. My day is now condensed, and it's dictated by forces that aren't just my force. If I'm in the middle of something, I'm finally at the end of the day, I'm writing a decent paragraph. It's time to go pick up the kids. You have to go pick up the kids by a certain time. You can't just take another half an hour. And then there goes another 3 hours just to get to the point where you end it. And that's hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. but it's certainly not unique. And it's not unique to just women. And so, if you're looking around at faculty positions and looking at different departments, they have different environments. And a lot of younger male colleagues have young families, and that environment is just as important as how many women there are in the department. For those of you at Duke know that there aren't a lot of women faculty on the chemistry at Duke, and yet it's been a great environment in terms of work-life balance because there is, there are a lot of young families and the fathers are doing exactly what they're all taking part of it. So, it's a, you look for those kinds of environments, I think.
Just two quick thoughts. So usually everything moves along smoothly in terms of, okay, the work stuff, the family stuff. The worst day is when you wake up in the morning and your kid's sick and can't go to daycare, and then you're like, what are you gonna do? That's when everything, all your plans get thrown out the window. And again, back to the flexibility of this job. What I typically do is there's usually some undergraduate that I've gotten to know from some previous semester who I'm not currently teaching, who, if all else fails, can babysit for an hour in my office while I go teach. Like the one thing that I just sort of have to be there to do is teach right there. I can't call in a sub. And just an example of this, again, the flexibility of our job is a male colleague of mine whose wife is a chemist in industry. When his kids were little, he was always the one who'd stay home with them because we don't have to ask for a day off. We don't have a certain number of sick days and vacation days. Again, we're our own bosses, and if we don't come in for a day, no one's gonna, as long as we cover our class, we're cool, it's good, right? And so he was always the one staying home because if his wife did, she'd use all her sick days and all her vacation days with kids having the flu, and they'd never actually get to take a real vacation. So, there definitely are benefits. And anyway, that's fine.
Coming back to the idea about the woman with the children, and I had experienced some discrimination with that in industry, where I was interviewing for a supervisory position in production, and there was also a man interviewing for the same position who had less education, had not had any experience with the product line that I had been working in for 4 or 5 years, and they offered it to him. And I went to ask because I was interested to see what could I do to prepare myself for this next step. And they maybe weren't in so wise in their choice of words, but basically said it was because I had kids. And anyway, as it turns out, the other man decided not to take the position because he did not want to relocate, his wife did not want to relocate. So they came back and offered it, and I think they're happy with that. So you still can run into that. That hasn't been that long ago, but hopefully it is diminishing quickly.
So I'll give this a slightly different perspective. I don't think it matters whether you have kids or not. I don't have any kids. I still have lots of demands on my life. The older you get, the more demands you have. I don't really understand it, but I look at the end of the day and I'm like, what did I do today? Like, nothing. And so, I think you decide, if you're going to have kids, you have to make a choice with your husband or partner that you're going to do it, and they are the most important thing in your life, and that doesn't mean you give up everything else. I think a lot of marriages, in fact, fail because they give up everything for their kids, and they forgot that they actually were people. And you have to balance those things, but life is difficult. Life's not fair. It's stressful. I don't think it matters what you do. If you do something that you love and that you enjoy, if you enjoy your job, God, that's a lot less stressful than I go to a job that I go, oh God, I gotta go to work today. I seldom say, oh God, I gotta go to work today. That's not something that comes out of my mouth. So, I just don't think. I think we have it better than most people. Don't tell anybody that.
It's recorded, yes.
I mean, we don't get paid as well as some people, but there are balances too for that. So, you just have to make choices in your life, and if kids are important to you, then you have to work that into your life. And if they're not, that's okay too, you know. But I don't think it matters.
We have time for one more question.
I'll ask a question.
So since we've been on the topic of having kids with the whole, lab and everything happening. So a lot of them work in more biological chemistry labs, things like that. For us who, say, do organic chemistry or organic chemistry, trying to schedule having kids while working in a lab or in postdoc is a little bit more difficult when you have to consider that you don't actually want to be around chemicals and things like that. So did any of you experience that, or have any experience like taking time off when you're trying to have children or something like that, or how people manage this?
So there's some pretty nasty chemicals in the biology lab too.
Oh, yeah.
I was doing metabolic labeling, radioactive metabolic labeling during graduate school. Went through 40 millicuries and 332 in a month. But while I was pregnant, I asked a colleague in the lab to do the pipetting of the actual concentrated isotope for me. And I did the rest of my experiments myself. And I was very careful. I was a little more careful while I was pregnant than I might have been, otherwise. My kids have the normal numbers of fingers and toes and teeth and things like that. So I think you want to be careful about it, but I don't, as long as you're following safe lab practices, there's no reason why you can't do almost your entire experimental protocols.
I'm the experimental nuclear phases, and when I was working, I had my son when I was a graduate student. I was preparing for my college, and I had to deal with some chemicals. So I was just very, very careful, talk to the safety people, making sure I do everything carefully. And also, before I moved my lab to accelerator lab, I also talked to the radiation safety people there just to look at what is the guideline, what is the overall radiation protection for pregnant worker and everything. So that's what I did.
So I got my PhD early in metallic chemistry, and I will tell you a little bit about my lab mate who was pregnant in graduate school. And so, similarly to what you said, she was in her fourth year. I mean, she really was sort of getting close to the end and had a pretty defined set of experiments that she wanted to do to write up her thesis. And she met with the OSHA folks, and they actually went through, I mean, they really just laid out all the experiments that she had planned on doing and looked into the chemicals she would be working with. And I mean, of course, some things, you're making new things and they're unknown. But they basically, I mean, they sort of crossed off some of the experiments she planned on doing and said, these aren't going to be safe things to work with. But they sort of narrowed it down and went through everything with her. And, same thing, she had a kid and she went on. But there were experiments that she ended up not doing for her thesis because of it.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap it up, but I really want to thank all the professors for taking the time and all of you for the really great questions.